And sometimes, you know, because we have big sessions, which are absolutely amazing, I don't, you know, I've got to do them in, you know, my time. So
I
anyway,
understand that, and I have no
yeah,
sympathy for you whatsoever.
I know. That's fine. But anyhow, I had a little cry over
I
it, but
haven't,
it's
but
okay.
even there's a couple of people here that have done the course, and they've done the course on the ground, and they don't get a second chance, and it was never recorded.
I can only be grateful that I'm here.
Oh, you don't have to be grateful. That there's an inherent thing about that. Now, the Page of Wands is an interesting little puppy. If this turns up at the Tower, it's fire. There are a lot of other cards that go with this to produce this, but I got a lot of this for business owners in the Byron region a few years ago, just after the 2008 financial collapse. Oh, let me show you one of these around it. So if I've got that and I put a tower with it, you've got fire, and you wonder, what's this? Arson. And I'm talking about 3 restaurants. Can we be clear? 3 cafe slash restaurants in the Byron area. In 3 separate instances in the warning, this was at the bottom, with the fire up the top and all the dealings with insurance companies and an Ace of Pentacles in there, and it said, just use your cunning, please. Just use your cunning. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yes, they burned their own places down. Yes, they made certain they had somebody. Yes, this card was suggesting they didn't leave the cans with the accelerant in them around the building, where they could perhaps be traced back to the person of origin. So this was using the cutting. And all 3 businesses concerned claimed the insurance money because the business was closed, would have closed down otherwise. Yes, so the Page of Wands with a Strength card is the time of Leo. With the Sun card is the time of Aries. And that can sometimes be with the Emperor card as well. With the Temperance card, time of Sagittarius. So kind of ditto the kings and queens, yes? So this can turn up as a creative work as well. It's all your writing, essays, books. This is also funny because this is for somebody who's got to, for example, if there was an Emperor card with this is somebody who's got to finish their homework and doesn't want to do it and leaves it till the last minute. Other than that, it's just pretty much any creative venture. For example, look, if you put it with your pentacles, it's the child of the garden. It's that nourishing, nurturing, young aspect of the garden. So it's not completely fulfilled. But it's also a very quick growing child, fire sign, Sagittarius, Leo, or Aries. This is the typical example of a boy who's just turned 12 and all of a sudden they're 6'2". So there's your Page of Wands. 8 of Wands, country, rural land. Now, your terminology is going to differ depending on who you're speaking to, because if I'm working with First Nation people and I'm talking about being on country, perfect example of Byron Bay is these 2. So it's a coastal place, sort of like a city, but it's also rural at the same time. So that's very touristy. It'll be Oahu, Honolulu. It's got a hermit card with it. It could be an environment that's in Canada, or an environment that's in the South Island of New Zealand, or an environment that's definitely on the coastal environment. A really good example, if this is in Cornwall, we're looking at Penzance. So it's on the coast, but it's also parts of Brittany. In any environment, it's got that feel to it. It's not by a river. That'd have the 6 of Swords with it. But these place cards can be so significant when you're helping a person find out where they're going to live, where they're going to move to. Really important. They can give you such specifics. 8 of Wands, when it turns up with the Strength card, is desert. On the odd occasion, it can be like sending out your resume to a whole group of people or sending out a whole lot of PR, but it's really never much that. It's not that much anymore. It doesn't work that way in the age of internet. Your 2 of Wands is usually, again, this is usually city. It's not so much a big city. It doesn't have that complexity. That complexity could turn up if you put an emperor card with it, because the emperor is so staid, so structured, so very, very large.
It's not always near the sea. There seems that there's water there, is it? Is that
Yeah, it's coastal.
it's coastal? Yeah. All right.
It's San Francisco.
Well, it also seems to come up for here, but we've only got 1,000 people here, but it's right near the sea.
If it's a major capital city, it's a major capital city.
But it's not where I'm not is. It's a town, but it's near the
It's
city.
going to turn up with the eight of wands.
Yeah, it
But it
does.
may not necessarily turn up with the eight of wands where you are if it's people who live there, because if they live there, they don't consider it to be a coastal city in a rural environment. Like when I lived in Byron, I didn't necessarily think of it as the two of wands with the eight of wands. But it's interesting because when the further afield you are with people, if they're coming to you internationally, you've got to know where this is. And interestingly enough, if I think of the west coast of America, this is more San Jose than it is San Francisco. Yeah, because it's got a smaller feel to it.
What would you say would be San Fran then?
Hmm?
What would be San Francisco then in contrast? Just because now you're speaking my language, I get you.
Yeah, you'll find things like the Ace of Pentacles will fall with the San Francisco because it's very established area, and it's also got a sense of gold or guilt about it.
More like a smaller village kind of style place rather than being a city. Then it's like the eight of wands would be beside it for somewhere that's like Takika, where Nishka is.
It would definitely depend on where it was for sure, and who you were reading for, very certainly. Okay. At the same time, it's going to change radically. For example, if it's got a Three of Cups with it, an Ace of Swords with it, because there's your tattoo expo or your acupuncture expo, or where people of like mind come together to do with the sword, which is the needle or the pins or the sewing. It could be a sewing expo, and that could be Montreal. That could be Montreal then. So it'll change the context depending on what it's falling with. Yeah? Rather than saying it's just a capital city or it's just a city, it's going to change its context with what's around it.
So would it, if it was just the two of wands with the Three of Cups there, is that like a festival?
Well, with the Three of Cups, Four of Wands.
Four of Wands with Three of Cups would be more
Four
of
of Wands is a festival. And interesting enough, Four of Wands with the Five of Wands is a music festival. Blues and roots. In a sort of a city, it's a coastal environment. It's a top, again with that, don't forget the world in their hand. It's a top quality music festival as well. So it could be as easily be the Edinburgh festival, Fringe festival, as it could be any other music festival. But it isn't Woodstock. You'd need a world card for it to be Woodstock, which world card would tell you how vast it is. Yeah, but it's definitely a music festival. If you remove the Five of Wands from it, it's like a lecture festival. It's where people go to learn. They go to learn, to train, etc. At the same time as that happens, this is a situation whereby a person's sort of at a lecture and they don't want to listen to the lecturer. I mean, where am I up to? Okay, let me explain weird ones. So, Lover's card, Ace of Swords, Death card. Sorry, Lover's card, Tower, Death. Lover's Tower, Death. Lover's Tower, Death. Lover's Tower, Death. Over and over and over and over again for years. Didn't bring this up, which was the city. But the Lover's card and the Tower was the Twin Towers in New York, because the Lovers is twins and the Tower's the Tower. When I saw it coming, I thought it was the Twin Towers of the Gold Coast. Four of Wands is a celebration. That can be anything from a sexpo right through a celebration with the Empress card of a birth. It can be when they stop the lockdowns in Melbourne, everybody heads for the pub or the cafe. But it's not a card of drunkenness. This is just the joy of celebrating the Four of Wands. If this one here, the Four of Wands, turns up with the Hierophant card, you got a wedding. This one turned up with the Hierophant card and an Ace of Pentacles with one of my clients who's an Indian woman, and I went, what the fuck are you paying for your dress? She said $70,000. Then I had one last week, and there was this one in the Hierophant card, and then there was the very, very bottom was a tower, and I said, you're going to be, and it wasn't to do with the client, it was somebody they knew, and I looked at it and they said, there's going to be a wedding. I said, keep your mouth shut. And they went, oh, I know what that is. I went, don't you say a word about how this is going to end up. I've seen it when people were engaged to be married, and they'll come for a reading, and I can see the outcome, and it's like, oh. Because you'll see it if you're doing 3-year increments, for example. Sometimes you do 3 years, sometimes you do 20-year increments, okay? But then you've got the Hierophant card, the Four of Wands, a Four of Pentacles, a Death card. You go, that didn't last long, did it? I'm so serious that it's almost funny. Like, you could say that if it was a time of year and it was falling with an Empress card and it wasn't a birth, it's going to be spring, rather the time of spring. Seven of Wands is teaching and learning. But the thing about the teaching and the learning, it is not education. You know why? You can't see one face down there. Nobody's looking, which means probably nobody's listening. If there's faces there, it would look like this. But it is definitely teaching, or it's someone lecturing, etc. It can be people talking across the internet through IT, yes, because you can't see necessarily, you're not sitting with the person. So it can be talking at. You'll have this turn up with the auction for a house. Place your bets, it'll be the same with horse racing. Place your bets, but Tara doesn't like horse racing, so you're going to get a devil card with the strength card, aren't you? This one will also turn up as a foundation if somebody's going through a lot of stress and a lot of struggle, and it turns up in the horse latitude. I'm going to say, just keep on top of it. That's it. You're keeping on top of it. You get it? You can see that. The reason I've loved these cards for 44 years, fucking 50 years or whatever, is because they're so obvious. When they come together and you trust the patterns and you trust the visuals, these visuals start... They may not have been what Pamela Coleman Smith originally thought they were supposed to be, but just through practice and repetition, they end up being exactly correct. I mean, I'm talking 10 times out of 10.
How would you feel about that one as an outcome law, the Seven of Wands?
I'm just going to... You ready?
Yeah.
If this was a Monday, it would be Monday, is a sentence.
Yes.
But there's no outcome to it. Most of the time, these are rolling from one thing into the next, one thing in the next, like a sentence, rather than being an outcome. If it turned up, for example, in Keter or in the Dead Reckoning spread as the final card, we haven't finished yet. We haven't finished yet.
Okay.
You've got to have more information before you can see the context. It won't be with this. This is not the context. If, for example, you had this card turn up with an Emperor, which is your formal education as we know it, and then there was a Magician card, the Magician card would be the outcome, which means you've finished that course. You've completed that course. You've got a tick beside your name. But on its own, it just says you're doing a course.
No, it showed up in a Dead Reckoning spread on an outcome.
Then you
in that position. Yep. Okay.
Absolutely need more information. This is why the Dead Reckoning spread on its own is just never enough. Yeah. It's also why when we do a Dead Reckoning spread, you do the so-called near future, then you do the further future, which also starts now, but you may have more information. Then you can put the two lots together and get an outcome.
Okay.
Some things are ongoing for life, and there is no outcome.
Okay.
In difference to the Nine of Wands. The Nine of Wands can be an outcome. The Wands are, in their own way, almost as challenging as the Swords. The Nine of Wands has its productive side aspect to it, and it also has, I don't want to give it a single word. So the Nine of Wands basically says you're not listening. Or similarly, I have said this and said this and said this, and now I am shutting my mouth because I have said enough and you haven't listened. Because this person has gathered their words, because Wands are words. Wands are communication. More than anything, they represent communication. This is also the person, though, who is shut up by an authority figure or a seeming authority figure. In some ways, it's heroic. In some ways, the Nine of Wands can be as much that young man standing in Tiananmen Square staring down the tank as any other card in the whole pack. This would be the one. They're standing their ground. They're not justifying themselves. They're not wasting their words. It can be really harsh, particularly for a parent. Okay, look, let me put the Five of Wands with it. Five of Wands can be a mess. Everything's everywhere. Everything's all over the place. This is you telling your offspring to please clean up the mess. And they're not listening. So what happens after a while? You are muted. This can be muting. This is also that 14 or 15-year-old child that's making the mess who says, don't fucking tell me what to do, bitch. This person doesn't want to speak to you. This person, this Nine of Wands, they don't want to communicate with you. This Nine of Wands is not heard, is not being listened to. As such, it could also, if it's got problematic cards with it, be a person standing their ground, defending their position. But with the Nine of Wands, in difference to the Nine of Swords, the Nine of Swords, of course, we saw that one before. This is stress and worry and upset. All of these wands are research, so they know what they're talking about. Now, this is a really interesting concept because of one of the tarot collectives that I worked with, I don't remember when, there was a person doing the study with me named Steve Williams. And Steve didn't understand that I could debate and debate and debate and never argue. He's like, how do you do that? How do you get away with that? I said, I don't bring the big guns in. He said, what are you talking about, the big guns? I said, oh, I'm not going to quote from this book. I'm not going to quote from that book. I'm not going to raise my voice and try and overpower you. We're going to discuss the subject until we go deeper and deeper and deeper in our understanding of the subject, and your opinion matters to me and my opinion matters to you, because we both learnt from having the discussion. But when somebody has to be right, you've all known that, you've all experienced that, come on. You've all been shut down at some stage. So the Nine of Wands is problematic. The Five of Wands is music, a gathering of people that are all talking at once. But at the same time, it can be mess, just mess, but not horrific mess, just the kind of mess your teenager will have in their bedroom and you don't dare open the bedroom door. Similarly, Five of Wands is somebody who can do 5 things at a time, multitasker, and you're going to get cards that'll back that up. Magician card will turn up in that particular spread. Oh, there's a heap of them. A lot of your way shower cards will be around when this one's going to be affected by the way shower cards. You still going? You're writing things down? You're falling asleep on me? We all right? We together? Your Knight of Wands is your ordinary vehicle. There you go. That's sort of like, what's an ordinary vehicle? A car? It's a car. And it also represents travel. Just the word travel. It's movement, it's travel. If it turns up with a 10 of Wands, it can quite often be moving, carrying a heavy load. So it can be moving house. It can be a small ute, a big ute, Knight of Pentacles. This is your smaller vehicle carrying a heavy load. But it can also represent moving. And this will turn up when you are working with people who work with import-export, because they're moving goods from one place to the other. That's why you can't just read one card at a time. It's supported by the more information you've got, the better. It's like the difference between having one word and a chapter where there's some kind of relevance. You're all hunters. You're all searching for the relevance. You're all looking for, how does this all join up and make sense? And it will. This, look at it. It's nomadic. This is the person who's traveling with the teepee on the back of the vehicle. They're moving from place to place. There's no sense of stillness in this, but there's no sense of losing your bundle. So let's just go with the 10 of Wands, because the 10 of Wands is a heavy load. I love the 10 of Wands. There's certain cards that you go, oh, I can sit in the pocket with this one. The 10 of Wands is also when everything's been scattered, that's where it's come together. Look at that. Scattered together. Scattered together. And you might have it scattered, pissed off, together. Now these 3, it's hilarious. My publisher said to me, you've got 6 weeks to get that work completed, or before we go to press. And I'm like, fuck, it's all over the place. I haven't got any kind of context. Nothing's in order. I was like, okay, all right. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that. Don't talk to me. Don't talk to me. Go away. Leave me alone. And this is where I have done it. Ten of Wands is moving stuff from place to place, but that person's got the bundle, you see, they've got it all together, and there is strength in that bundle. It's a heavy weight, but it's so controllable, it's so doable. You'll see it with building, when a property's being built, when a house is being built, when all this is when the lumber, so-called the forest is now lumber, and the lumber is being carried, okay? It's when that particular person, I can't remember their name, planted 1 million trees on their property that was barren, and now it's a forest. This is this. It's that fabulous. Okay, what am I up to? King and Queen of Wands, People of Wands. Sagittarius, Leo, Aries people, or people that work in the creative arts. That's all I've got to say about that. Who they are and what they're like, and everything will depend on what's around them, particularly if we look at those wands we just looked at. If a magician falls between them, it's quite likely to be the same person. Okay, so as the Chariot is the way shower and is a card of victory, this also is a card of victory. So if I have somebody asking me a question, will I pass my exam? And will I get in as an ambo? And they have the Chariot card, which is their vehicle, so they're going to drive the ambulance, and they have the Six of Wands turning up as well to do with them passing their tests, and it's like victory and more victory, sweetheart. Victory and more victory. It's an absolute yes. This is a yes. Ace of Wands is also a yes as an outcome. And this is Six of Wands. That's all it is. Just means victory. Nothing else. You only need the one word for this, but it'll be in context to whatever you're looking at. Okay, Ace of Wands. It does mean yes, like the Death card can mean no. It's sort of, even though their Six of Wands can be yes, this is like yes. A person asks a question, you know, will I move to Botswana land? And this one comes up first in the answer spread. I don't need to read the rest of the pack. That's all. Ace of Wands is a book, spoken in the written word, fields of communication, the roots of the powers of communication, its spontaneity and its creativity, all in context with the rest of the subjects. Now, there's very interesting twists with all this. That tells me the person cannot speak of their grief. That happens to a lot of elder people. Another one which is really significant, a slightly tricky birth, because the Ace of Wands with the Sun card is always birth. Doesn't say it's messy birth, that'd be the Five of Wands with it. But it says it's slightly tricky. It's, you know, the person they are very clear about the way they want to have this birth, and so they're also very, very stubbornly saying, I'm having this birth the way I want this birth to be. This is me wanting a home birth. And somebody says, you've got to go to the hospital. It's like, oh, this is very sad, very sad. This is the, without going into too many stories, because I've got a million of them, when my eldest son was born, I was a single parent in the 1970s, and I got some work as a young 20-year-old in geriatric hospitals as a nurse, nursing aide. One-way doorways to the grave they were. These were living coffins. And this here, this is so significant, I would like to share the story with you. There was one man from Orkney who was in this hospital because his family had put him there. He had had a mild stroke. So he was walking with a stick, and part of his face slightly was paralyzed, but the rest of him was fine. This man had served in 2 world wars. He was in his 70s. I was on day shift this particular day, and I came in at 6 o'clock in the morning to start my shift, and it was his birthday. And he said, my family's taking me to lunch. I said, okay, what's the deal? He said, can you give me a hand to get dressed, please? So it was a 3-piece tweed number. He's got the shirt, he's got the tie, he's got the 3-piece tweed number, he's got the cap on his head, he's got his blackthorn cane, he sits on the chair with his bad leg up on his stoop. And when I left there at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, he's still sitting there. They never came. Nobody heard him. Please understand how serious this can be. What is wrong with us that we cannot listen to the elders? That we cannot hear their stories and understand what we maybe have lost in our society? Right. Moving on. Last one in the section, 3 of Wands can very often be a time sequence, 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months, or 3 years. This also can tend to be a coastal environment, but it's like along the seashore, along the coast. This is not as big as the 2 of Wands. In answer to your question earlier about, Nishka, about your environment, 3 of Wands. 3 of Wands, 8 of Wands, that's that area. It's much smaller. It's a little bit like sort of being on the coast of somewhere in Tasmania, but not Hobart, not Launceston. It's somewhere down the coast, like in Victoria, it could be Mornington Peninsula. Well, yeah, it's just not very well known wherever it is. It's just a little bit like whatever. Okay, so it's quite simple. It just says the person's coastal, or they're going coastal, or it's that 3-year period of time, so it's a bit distant time-wise. It very often times turns up at times. Now, I don't know why these turned up at time sequences, but this is what tarot taught me. And it was just like on.